Long ago, in a small, forgotten village where electricity flickered like a timid guest and muddy paths swallowed footsteps during the monsoons, there lived a boy named Aarav. He was barely 18, yet life had already tested him more than most men twice his age. Aarav's world was a frail hut at the village's edge, its thatched roof leaking with every rainfall, its walls cracked like the lines of sorrow carved into his young face. He had no parents to guide him. His mother's sickness had taken her when he was just a child, leaving behind an emptiness that no words could soothe. As for his father, Aarav's memory could not even recall his voice. Death had claimed him so early that the boy was left only with shadows of what a father's presence might have been. His uncle and aunt took him in, but not with the warmth of guardians, rather with the coldness of obligation. To them, Aarav was not family, only a burden. Each morning began not with affection, but with sharp words that cut deeper than hunger. Did we sign a lifelong contract to raise him? His aunt would scoff. He eats 2 meals a day and gives nothing in return, his uncle added. Even if we left him on the street, who would care? Aarav listened in silence, sitting on the edge of an old cot, clutching his torn school books as though they were relics of a happier time. Once, he had been the brightest student in the village school, praised for his quick mind and sharp memory. By the time he finished 7th grade, everyone believed he would go far. But dreams do not bloom where the soil is poisoned. When his mother died, his uncle's words ended his schooling in an instant. Forget books. Go earn something. A stomach cannot be filled with lessons. From that day, Aarav's classroom was the world itself, and his lessons were written in hardship. He searched for work wherever he could. His first job was with Baravlo, the village's old milkman. At dawn, Aarav would wake to feed the buffaloes, milk them, and then carry heavy pails door to door. His reward was 500 rupees a month, barely enough to buy a pair of sandals. But what weighed heavier than the buckets of milk were Baravlo's harsh words. One morning, when a pail slipped from Aarav's hands and spilled on the ground, Baravlo shouted in front of the entire village, "We're feeding an orphan like you, and still you can't do your work right." Humiliation burned hotter than the sun on his back. That very day, Aarav left the job. Next, he found work in the village sweet shop, helping the halwai during weddings and festivals. His duties were endless kneading dough until his arms ached, scrubbing greasy pots and packing away leftovers. The pay was 800 rupees, but the meals he got were often scraps. The halwai's lesson was sharp and bitter. Remember, boy, you cannot fill your stomach without dirtying your hands. Aarav took those words to heart. But one winter's night, while his fingers cracked from the cold, the halwai pressed a steaming vessel against his hand as punishment. Pain shot through him, and a new truth settled in his soul. When there is no respect, even labor becomes a chain. He left again. His third job was at a small flour mill on the edge of the village. There, he lifted sacks of grain, coughed in clouds of flour, and worked until his body trembled with exhaustion. The pay was slightly better, 1,000 rupees, and at least the owner treated him fairly. Aarav learned something precious. Even the smallest job, if done with dignity, could feel like honorable work. But the dust gnawed at his lungs, and sickness forced him to quit. One day, fate led him to Babar's roadside dhaba on the highway. Truck drivers, laborers, and travelers filled the air with noise and smoke, while Aarav washed dishes from dawn until long after dusk. For this, he received 3,000 rupees and 2 meals a day. The work was brutal, scrubbing kettles blackened by fire, cleaning rice grains from under tables, standing near stoves so hot they seemed to scorch the very air. But Aarav said little, complained even less, and worked harder than anyone else did at first. Babar Singh, the dhaba's owner, eyed him with suspicion. An orphan, he thought. Who knows when he'll run away? But weeks turned to months, And Aarav never missed a day, never stole a coin, never raised his voice. Slowly, trust replaced doubt. From today, Babar told him, you won't just wash dishes. You'll handle the counter, the money, the accounts. For the first time in his life, Aarav felt seen. His salary doubled to 6,000. He bought 2 pairs of clothes with his own money and saved a little each month. At night, after the dhaba closed, he would sit alone with a small diary, writing lines that no one else would ever read. Today I work without mistake. Today, someone called me brother. Perhaps I can become something. His uncle and aunt remained unchanged, mocking him even when he brought home 500 rupees as a contribution. But by then, Aarav had learned the most important lesson of all. Their words could not define him. His eyes no longer searched for approval, only for freedom. Freedom from dependence. Freedom from humiliation. Freedom to stand on his own. And so, each day, before the sun rose, Aarav walked to the dhaba with quiet determination, carrying not just trays and kettles, but also a vision. One day, his life would belong only to him. Life at the dhaba gave Aarav more than food and money. It gave him discipline, rhythm, and the faint taste of dignity. Every morning, before the first bus rumbled down the highway, he was already there, greeting customers with folded hands, preparing tea, balancing accounts. At night, when Babar closed the shutters, Aarav would walk back to his hut, tired but strangely fulfilled. His hut, however, was a mirror of his struggles. The roof leaked with every drizzle, the walls crumbled under his touch, and his cot was so old that each night it carved pain into his back. One evening, during a heavy monsoon rain, Aarav sat down to eat the little food he had carried from the dhaba. A drop fell from the roof into his plate, then another, until his meal was ruined. He stared at the dripping ceiling and clenched his fists. Enough, he whispered to himself. If I can repair my life day by day, I can repair this roof too. From that day forward, he began saving differently. Every night after work, he would take 100 rupees from his pocket and slip it into a small tin box he had hidden beneath his bed. On the lid, he pasted a scrap of paper with 3 words written in his careful handwriting. For the roof. 2 months later, the box rattled with 2,000 rupees. It wasn't much, but to Aarav, it felt like treasure. He went to the village ironmonger and bought old tin sheets. With a borrowed ladder from his uncle and a hammer clutched firmly in his hand, Aarav climbed onto his hut and began to work. The nails bent under his inexperience, his fingers blistered, but he refused to stop. By evening, the roof stood strong and patched out the next rain came. Aarav lay on his cot, eyes wide open, listening. Not a single drop fell. For the first time, he slept without fear of the storm. That night, he didn't just rest under a roof. He rested under proof that he could change his own fate, but Aarav was not finished. The walls of his hut were cracked like dry earth. So he bought clay and cow dung from a local mason named Bolu and, with his bare hands, smeared and smoothed the walls until they shone anew. His palms cracked, his nails bled, yet he smiled as he worked. Soon, the hut no longer looked abandoned. It looked alive. Next came a bed. With his next salary, Aarav purchased a wooden cot from a second-hand dealer. It creaked, but compared to his old rope cot, it felt like luxury. His back pain eased, and he could finally wake without stiffness chaining his body. Then he bought light. Electricity in the village was fickle, arriving like a guest who never knocked, often only at night. Yet Aarav wanted more than darkness. He bought a second-hand bulb for 100 rupees and a small table fan for 500. He wired them to the wall. The first time he switched them on, his hut glowed faintly, and a breeze cooled his brow. Now, he thought, I can dream without fear of shadows. One evening, Aarav sat outside the dhaba, eating from his tin lunchbox, watching the sun set behind the highway. The golden light touched the dust, the trucks, and his weary hands. He turned to Babar Singh and asked quietly, "Brother, did you ever dream of opening your own dhaba?" Babar chuckled. "Of course. First, I worked for others, carried their weight. Then one day, when my feet were strong, I laid my own brick. That's how this dhaba was born." The words sank deep into Aarav's heart. That night, as he scribbled in his diary, his pen trembled with a new kind of fire. "One day, I too will lay my own brick." A few weeks later, his eyes noticed something he had always overlooked: the old shop near the village bus stand. Its door was rusted, its bricks crumbling, and cobwebs hung like curtains inside. Everyone saw decay. Aarav saw possibility. He approached its owner, Mohan Kaka, one morning. "Kaka," Aarav said, "your shop is lying empty. Let me start a small stall there, tea, samosas, chol puri. Keep the rent low. I'll clean everything myself." The old man narrowed his eyes. "Alone? You think you can manage all that?" Aarav's voice was steady, humble yet unyielding. "Kaka, no dream is too big if the work behind it is honest." Mohan Kaka hesitated, then nodded. 200 rupees rent. The rest is your responsibility." Aarav's heart leapt, but he did not show it. He simply bowed his head. "Thank you, Kaka." The very next day, he began the transformation. With a broom, a mop, 2 buckets of water, and a packet of bleaching powder, he attacked the filth. He scrubbed the walls until the whitewash beneath peeked out. He cleared the cobwebs, washed the wooden shelves, polished the benches. He borrowed tools to make stools and tables. With his savings, he rented a gas cylinder and bought a small panda. By dusk, the shop no longer looked abandoned. It looked ready. The night before his opening, Aarav sat in the glow of his bulb-lit hut, diary open before him. His hands trembled as he wrote, "Tomorrow, for the first time, I will not work under someone else. Tomorrow, I will stand on my own." Sleep did not come easily that night. But for once, it wasn't worry that kept him awake. It was anticipation. At dawn, the village bus stand awoke with the rumble of engines and the shuffle of sleepy travelers. But that morning was different. Behind the rusty shutters of the once-forgotten shop, Aarav stood with flour on his hands, potatoes boiling on the stove, and chickpeas simmering in a pot. His heart thumped like a drum dot. It was the first day of his own stall. He hadn't chosen a name for it. When Babar Singh asked why, Aarav had smiled. "Names don't create identity," he said. "Taste and service do." By 6 o'clock, the shop was open. The smell of hot puris and spicy chol drifted across the bus stand, turning heads. The first customer was a farmer, weary from travel, his pocket carrying only 10 rupees. Aarav placed a steaming plate before him. "Fresh and hot, brother. Eat well." The farmer broke a piece of puri, dipped it into the chol, and took a bite. His eyes widened. "Not even in town have I eaten puris this hot." He left satisfied, and that evening returned with 3 more companions. By the end of the first day, Aarav had earned 300 rupees. After subtracting expenses, he saved 200. That night, by the light of his bulb, he wrote in his diary, "Today I stood on my own. Today, no one could call me a burden." The days turned into weeks, and Aarav's little stall blossomed. Each morning, he was the first to arrive at the bus stand, kneading dough, grinding spices, and arranging benches. By 7, the shop buzzed with farmers, drivers, and daily laborers. They came not only for the food, but for the respect Aarav gave them. He greeted each customer as brother, uncle, or sister, and when they left, he cleaned their tables himself. Word spread. "Aarav's chol puri has more than flavor," people whispered. "It has truth." By the end of the first month, his daily income had grown to 400 or 500 rupees. By the end of 4 months, he was earning 12 to 13,000 a month. To Aarav, this was more than wealth. It was proof that integrity could feed both the stomach and the soul. Yet even as money flowed, Aarav's life remained simple. He did not buy a new phone. He did not buy flashy clothes. Instead, he washed his old shirts carefully, repaired his sandals, and told himself, life must be decorated with honesty, not display. It was during one ordinary morning that Aarav's heart found a new calling. A government school stood a little way from the bus stand. Children trudged past his stall each day, their shoes torn, stomachs empty, eyes heavy with sleep. One day, a boy paused outside the shop, his gaze locked on the sizzling potatoes. "Come," Aarav called gently. "Eat." The boy shook his head. "I have no money." "I didn't ask for money," Aarav smiled. "I only ask you to study. Never stop reading." The boy hesitated, then sat down. Aarav served him a plate of puris. The child ate quickly, hungrily, joy flickering in his eyes. That day, a tradition began. From then on, 2 or 3 children would stop by daily. Sometimes Aarav gave them puris, sometimes bhujia, sometimes sweet khichdi made with jaggery and rice. He never told anyone. He never asked their names. His only words were, "Study, do not give up." Months passed. His stall became a trusted stop for travelers. Bus drivers recommended it. Farmers planned their journeys around it. Laborers said it was the one place where food tasted like respect. But Aarav was not just serving customers. He was quietly investing in futures. From his savings, he began paying the school fees of 2 children, whose parents could not afford it. He bought their notebooks, uniforms, and shoes, slipping the money quietly to the schoolteacher without ever revealing his name. When asked who was helping, the teacher would only reply, "There is a man who wants you to study. That is all you need to know." The children studied harder, fueled by unseen kindness. And Aarav, back at his stall, continued to fry puris and stir chickpeas, his face calm, his diary filling with new lines each night. Today, a child ate with a smile. Today, someone will not have to quit school. Today, I gave without asking for thanks. One evening, the school held its annual celebration. The headmaster stood on stage and said, "There are 2 students among us whose education has been made possible by someone who once stood outside this very school, hungry and hopeless. That person never wanted his name to be known, but today let us applaud his spirit." The crowd clapped, children cheered. Far away, near the bus stand, Aarav was frying potatoes. A little boy ran to him breathless. "Brother, it's you, isn't it? You paid my fees." Aarav smiled softly, placing a plate of hot food in front of him. "The food is warm," he said. "Eat first. We'll talk later." That night, under the quiet glow of his bulb, Aarav wrote in his diary, "Success is not what you keep. It is what you give without asking for anything in return." And so, the orphan once mocked as a burden had become the strength of many. His life was no longer about survival. It was about service. The seasons changed, but Aarav's rhythm never faltered. Each morning, before dawn broke across the dusty fields, he was already at his stall, kneading dough, boiling potatoes, and humming quietly to himself. The bus stand became his world, the chatter of travelers his music, the hiss of oil his heartbeat. For the villagers, his shop was no longer just a place to eat, it was a symbol. It stood as proof that honesty and persistence could turn even the most broken life into something whole. Drivers and laborers often said, "There's a taste in Aarav's food you can't buy." It's his truth. As months rolled into a year, his income grew steady. 12 to 13,000 rupees a month was more than enough for a simple life. But Aarav never sought extravagance. He still lived in his patched hut, still wore the same carefully washed clothes, still wrote in his diary by the dim light of his bulb. His joy lay not in what he owned, but in what he could give. Each month, he quietly set aside 1,500 rupees for the education of the 2 children he had chosen to support. He never spoke of it. He never sought gratitude. To him, their books and uniforms were like bricks laid on a foundation bricks that would build a stronger future than his own past had allowed. When their parents asked who was helping, the schoolmaster only replied, "There is a man who once had nothing, but wants your children to have everything he missed." And so, Aarav's influence spread like ripples in a pond. People began to see his stall, not as a business, but as a beacon. Children gathered there not only for food, but for encouragement. Farmers sat longer than usual, talking with him about life and labor. Even strangers felt warmth in his simple greeting. "Eat well, brother. Travel safe." Yet Aarav himself never claimed greatness. When asked why he worked so hard, he would only say, "Because I know what it feels like to have nothing. And I know what it feels like to be seen as nothing. I don't want anyone else to feel that way." The day came when the school held its annual celebration once again. This time, 2 children stood proudly with their certificates of achievement. The headmaster, moved by their progress, announced, "Behind these students stands a man who once sat outside this very school, unable to study further because of poverty. Yet instead of bitterness, he chose generosity. He is living proof that circumstance does not decide character." The crowd applauded, their cheers rising like thunder. In the distance, by his stove, Aarav smiled faintly, turning the purus in hot oil. He never walked onto the stage, never claimed the praise. To him, the applause was meant for the children, not for him. Later, one of the boys ran to him breathless, waving his certificate. "Brother, I passed because of you. You gave me books. You gave me food." Aarav placed a plate of chol puri in front of him and said softly, "Eat first. Dreams grow stronger on a full stomach." That night, his diary bore a new line. "Happiness is not applause. Happiness is watching someone else rise because you refuse to let them fall." Years later, when people spoke of Aarav, they didn't speak of his poverty, nor of his struggles at the milk shop, sweet shop, or flour mill. They spoke of the boy who turned a broken hut into a home, who turned a forgotten shop into a gathering place, and who turned his wounds into kindness for others. The uncle and aunt, who once called him a burden, lived to see the boy they had dismissed become a man respected by all. But by then, their words no longer mattered. Aarav's life had already spoken louder than any insult. The lesson of his journey was simple, yet profound. Strength is not given. It is built one brick, one coin, one act of perseverance at a time. And true success is not measured by what you keep, but by what you give without asking. For those who visited his stall, Aarav became more than a cook. He was a quiet reminder that no matter how dark the night, dawn always comes for those who keep moving. He was proof that an orphan could become an anchor, that a boy mocked as useless could become a pillar of his community. And so his story spread told not by him, but by the many whose lives he touched. Farmers, children, laborers, and travelers carried his tale from one village to the next. The tale of a boy who refused to surrender, who lived not on charity, but on his own strength, and who lit the path for others with nothing but his honesty. Even now, if you pass through that old bus stand, you may hear the clang of a ladle against a pan, smell the aroma of fresh purus, and see a man with steady hands and kind eyes serving food with a smile. That is Aarav, the boy who once had nothing, and yet gave more than most ever will. And his diary, still hidden in the small hut with patched walls, bears the final line he wrote, "If I could rise, so can you." Struggle is the seed, honesty is the water, and persistence is the sunlight. Grow your life with them, and nothing can stop you.